Hi, welcome to TTOG. We're your hosts, Sarah and Annmarie. This podcast is not a replacement for therapy. We are therapists. However, we are not providing free therapy.
Welcome back to TTOG. We are your hosts. I'm Annmarie.
I'm Sarah.
And on today's episode, Sarah's kind of going to start with mood swings and all of the things.
All the things mood swings. So we broke this episode up into different segments because I feel like this episode is very loaded with not only what mood swings are, but how they affect our daily functioning, what a diagnosis looks like, and all that good stuff. So, what are mood swings? How do we explain that on a non clinical or Google level? I would say mood swings are the emotions that we channel through during normal everyday life, stressful events, hormonal changes, financial changes, all of those common aspects or areas in our life that bring us stress.
Mm-hmm.
How would you maybe add to that?
I think
you add to it?
I think it would be the internal and external ways that we navigate through our everyday life. Meaning, like our internal world, how we present in our everyday, and how those external experiences also can shift, right? I think, no matter if you're clinical or not, saying that your mood can shift with a drop of a hat is very valid.
With or without a diagnosis,
Correct.
I want to add, our moods, we're human. And our brain is the most complex thing about us. And sometimes we aren't in full control. I hate to say it, but that is a thing. So, moving on to what you just said, I wanted to touch on the types of mood swings. So you have our situational mood swings and then our clinical mood swings. And what I mean by clinical is the mood swings that come with the diagnosis. So borderline, bipolar, anxiety, depression, we go in a hill of emotions, an upward scale, a downward scale. They can look, honestly, many different ways at many different times. Situational, how would you describe situational? Again, those hormonal changes, those life changes, financial changes, things like that.
I think they're expected and unexpected events that go on in your life. And I think too, with going from the hills and the valleys is what I call them. Right. We want it to be much more hill and valley. When it becomes a mountain and a ditch, that's when those bipolars and borderlines really come into play, where it is directly affecting your mood and the rest of your day and life.
Right.
Very directly.
Right. So I feel like stress is just a huge, I know we touch on this every single episode, but stress is so powerful. If we don't manage our stress correctly, that's when I think these mood swings come into play heavily with the ups and downs. And if they're not managed, now I'm not saying medical or medication management, things like that, but if you're not using, the previous episode where you talked about coping skills, if we're not using something that helps us manage those mood swings, then they get not only too much for other people, but too much for ourselves. In my experience, going back and forth and having a stressful event or a life change that I haven't been able to totally manage, my mood swings have been unbearable sometimes. And I hate the concept of oh my God, she has such bad mood swings. That's not what it means.
Right.
That's not what it means, and it's not only for women that have periods.
Right, because there's actual medical evidence that men also go through a cycle. It's just not called a period, and they don't externally, bleed.
Correct. Which brings me to the second segment of the science behind mood swings. So when I say science, I'm talking about like the brain chemistry and the hormonal influences. So mood swings happen when there's a rapid or intense shift in a person's emotional state. And occasional ups and downs are obviously normal, but extreme and frequent mood shifts often point out underlying psychological issues or biological issues. Sometimes people don't realize that those things that you fly off the handle about, or those things that you're not too concerned about, can be biological. Like, it can be either a learned experience or something that somebody else has. Like, you're not just labeled as a diagnosis. That could come from hereditary things, which people don't understand.
And I think that's where, a lot of times in my generation, your generation, individual, like, probably it stops with your generation, because my parents, your parents, our grandparents, mental health wasn't really talked about. So when we ask, like, hey, has there been any diagnoses in your family? It's not because we're asking, oh, you have the same thing. It's that's informative.
Right. And how we plan our treatment.
Correct. And also informative for you to be able to say, like, oh, you got a little bit of something.
Right.
Maybe I did get this, handed down to me.
Right. Correct.
And it's important to understand that.
Correct. I agree. That's one of my favorite questions, I think, in intake, because it gives me, that one simple question gives me such a deep dive into your family background. Like, you could talk to me for hours about your relationship with your mom and dad, but like, your family history really breaks down why that relationship is the way it is, or why you're feeling the way it is. Like, certain things like that. So moving on to brain chemistry. So neurotransmitters like your serotonin, your dopamine, and all of those fun things play a major role in regulating your mood. So obviously everybody knows that the higher your dopamine, the less likely you are to have a lot of those peaks and valleys, like you like to call them. So I guess where that's going into play is when you are regulating things like that and being surrounded by things that increase your dopamine levels, the less likely you are to feel shitty.
Right. And the more often, right. And the more often, right. So I think there just has to be that balance of, no, it's not every single day that you need to really say, like, what can increase my dopamine?
Right.
That is not what we're saying. We are just saying, like, more often than not, what are things, again, that we talked about last time, what is in your toolbox that you can utilize to increase that dopamine
in a healthy way? And I'm also not, like, I am not a huge medication person, but like, even like, that is the reason why people are prescribed certain anti-anxieties or antidepressants, because sometimes our brain just lacks that ability to create more dopamine. No matter how happy we are in a situation, or no matter how much happiness we try to bring in to surround ourselves, sometimes the brain still just lacks that aspect. And that's where that medication kind of comes in. And obviously it could be extremely helpful, like I said, because dopamine also affects motivation and pleasure, which those imbalances can lead to plenty emotional highs and lows, not only emotional, but mental. Because if we break that statement down, dopamine affects motivation and pleasure. If we aren't motivated, or now pleasure can mean any aspect, financial pleasure, sexual pleasure, pleasure in any relationship. Work pleasure, like all of those things that we find
pleasurable.
Right. If that's not happening, that's when it goes. Like, your brain is noticing that inconsistency of, oh, when I'm here, I'm not happy. This brings me...
I'm going in the ditch.
Right. This brings me a very low point. Or when I'm over there with them, I'm at a really high point. And then that's where it shifts. So kind of understanding how your dopamine actually really affects how things are in your brain and
Right.
how those mood swings.
And it's funny because, like, when you're just describing that, it brings me to almost like a toxic relationship with yourself.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
I'm going to go over here and I'm going to feed myself, you know, not wonderful food, and I'm going to feel like crap. But then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to surround myself with a really positive person, and you have this huge gap of like, what am I doing to my body? I'm going from here to here. You're having a toxic relationship with yourself. You're putting yourself in that, here's Mount Everest and here's the lowest ditch of the ditches.
Right. And then that brings me back to when you're doing that, your stress levels are high. Yeah. Your cortisol levels are high.
See you later.
You're not eating, or you're eating too much. Like, those are the things that trigger that stress. And I hate to say this, but stress can 110% be detrimental to your life.
Yes.
Like, people don't realize that. Like, oh, you're stressed. Like, if you have an overload of stress, it can be just as bad as a heart attack, if not triggering a heart attack.
Yeah. It
So
leads to more.
Very much so physical issues or symptoms. So that's also why stress and anxiety feel like heart attacks a lot. Like, they present themselves in those ways because they very likely could be those things.
Right.
Not saying to scare anybody, but it's true. It really is true. So.
Right. It's like if you go to the doctors, they ask you, what is your life like? How much stress are you under? What is your work environment like? What is your home life like?
Right. Which brings back the questions of this.
They do not ask you that for giggles.
Right.
They ask you that because that is a very valid, factual, science-driven aspect that they need to know.
They need the evidence. They need the facts to present anything else. People are not just going to give you, like, that's like you walking into the doctor's office and saying, I need X, Y, and Z medication because of, and then that's it, because of.
So I'm and maybe this is like, I'm reaching here, but it's like if you go to the doctors and you say, I need a weight loss medication because I can't lose weight, right? And they ask you, okay, what's your stress level like? Tell me what your day is like. Do you move your body? What kinds of things do you put in your body? And you say, well, I go to fast food restaurants every single day and I sit at home. They're not going 9 times out of 10. Maybe they will because they know you're motivated to lose the weight, but there's other things that they need to focus on too to be able to help that medication actually
and you don't know underlying medical issues that could be preventing you from losing weight, and not only preventing you from losing weight, but preventing you from being motivated. Like, back to this.
Yes.
Like, you are only as motivated and pleasured as you allow yourself to be. So again, that dopamine comes into play. So love that correlation. Very good. The next one that is so important, and I cannot explain this or like
say it enough,
preface enough, hormones, especially when you have your cycle as a woman. People don't realize that a cycle is not, now this is going to be like really woman's health really quick. Just like give me 5 minutes. But a woman's cycle is 28 days, if not longer or shorter. But on average, it's 28 days. Now, let me just explain and break this down really quick. Your period as a woman ranges from, again, on average, 5 to 7 days, okay? Before you get your period, that luteal phase that you're in, that can last up to 2 weeks. And that is these mood swings, highs and lows, because your body is adjusting to about to be getting this cycle that releases more than just, let me add, blood, okay? It releases plenty more than that.
And toxins.
But that luteal phase really sets you up for, I don't know if you ever see, I go back to this because I know a lot of our audience is tailored to watching TikTok. But if you ever watch TikTok and you see a woman post about her luteal phase and how she's posting about like crying or like self-care more, this or that, like we are trying to give ourselves more dopamine because it is so low right now because of the hormones.
And
so
people are aware.
this can fluctuate and impact the mood during PMS and during menopause and during all of those different things. And not only those, but you don't know if someone has other medical issues like PCOS or things like that or endometriosis. Like there's so many things that can go into that mood swing or that cycle of things like that. So I just wanted to really touch base on that because that can be a huge science behind.
Right. And if maybe you're one of those people that really didn't get to know what your body was like growing up. And I'll say I did not know that there was science behind it. And me getting to know what that looked like until I was like a little bit older.
Right.
Because like, again, my mom didn't really teach me really anything. No bark on her, but like
Not her thing.
not her thing. And it's fine.
Not her way of nurture.
Absolutely. But so you understanding what your cycle is to not be critical of yourself, but it's to help you. It's to help you understand.
We're so passionate, right?
How much dopamine we need and what thing in that toolbox do we need, right?
Right.
There's this this quote that I just saw that hormones are the soundtrack, not the script.
I love that. Oh, that's a good one.
Right? I love that. So, like, it influences your emotional tone, but they don't write the whole story.
Correct.
So, like, when you're in that phase of these hormones, understanding those hormones, okay, this is not your whole life. Like, you just understanding that this is what I need in those moments is super uber important.
Kind of just like how people tell you, this is a little TMI, but like it'll make sense. People tell you, or specifically your doctor, or specifically whoever you trust, you are not going to go into a relationship or your period or a sexual relationship or whatever it may be, not understanding yourself. Because how the hell is someone else supposed to understand what you enjoy, what you find pleasurable, what you find like good enough if you don't know it yourself? So if you're not understanding, now this is where it goes hand in hand. If we're not understanding our bodies, now I didn't understand my body or my period for I don't know how long when I was younger, but now that I am so in tune with my feelings in my body and what's consistent each cycle, it helps me help other people help me.
Yeah.
Like that was so intense, but like that being so analytic and observing like those things about me helps me help myself by asking for help from others, and that goes hand in hand with any relationship or any physical like symptoms with anything like really if you're very in tune with those things and you understand like, okay, I'm in my luteal phase because I'm a little bit more upset. My mood swings are my mood's very low. So I need to do X, Y, and Z to kind of bring it back up because I know when I'm on my period, they're gonna skyrocket because I know that I can be a little bitchier when I'm on my period. And then it's gonna go down again because after my period, I'm going to be ovulating and I'm going to be feeling my best. And that is proven too. When you are done with your period and you're ovulating whenever during your cycle, you feel and look your best because that's just how the woman's body works. It's being released for you to be like, and then you might find yourself like wanting to jump on your partner a little bit more because you're like, okay, like
let's do it, right? But understanding that,
right?
So
those feelings,
knowing what that 2 weeks beforehand looks like no, it's not about you. Like, I'm sorry, I just feel like garbage,
right?
Like looking at myself in the mirror, let alone like with minimal clothes on.
Correct.
So it's important to know yourself.
No, I love it. I know I love it because I wasn't always like that, and this is like self-disclosure, but I'm like, oh, just got my period, okay, or I would literally just like let it come whenever, and now I am so in tune with certain things that it helps. It really does help. So, okay,
Good one, Sarah.
thanks. That's like a personal one, for me.
I know.
Okay, so that was kind of like the science behind it, brain chemistry wise. We're going to shift to mental health disorders.
Okay.
So the first one I want to talk about is bipolar disorder, which is characterized by intense mood swings, mania, which are highs, and depression, which are lows. Now, this can be a very intense diagnosis or intense undiagnosed diagnosis. I didn't know how I wanted to say it there, but so I guess our life can present, the reason why I wanted to touch on this one is our life can present situations in our life can present themselves as highs and lows that look like this. Like I hear this all the time. Oh my God, I'm so bipolar. Oh my God, they're so bipolar. Oh my God, they go back and forth. Like, no. Life is a very situational place. We are all doing life for the first time ever. And things like these present themselves and kind of mimic the symptoms or things that look like these disorders. And it's really crucial. This is when it comes up is very crucial with how you diagnose somebody. Because also a misdiagnosis can be extremely hurtful to those highs and lows that you experience.
Yeah. And I think being a little bit more specific, so I hope you're not mad that I'm going to get a little bit more specific with the manic and the depressed. So manic, to me, it is not just high of high. It's also not being dramatic and not too much.
Right.
Okay? It is your brain in overdrive. It is like being
overstimulated.
It's like being like electric. You are on like Donkey Kong. Like you're going.
And nothing's stopping.
No one's stopping you, right? Like mania also isn't passion.
No.
Right? It's pressure.
Right.
Dressed up as power.
Right. And it's almost like, I hate to use this word, but it really, really reminds me of like being almost neurotic.
Yeah.
Like not even on purpose, but like our brain shifts to the like, okay, like.
Well, yeah. It's like your brain is being convinced that you are going to figure out your whole entire life and purpose at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Right, and we need to go. It's good. And we need to go. We need to do it now. Like,
correct.
Right now, or else if you miss, you're done for it, and then that low comes into play.
Right, and the low is not, oh, I'm sad. It is gravity doubling.
Right.
Like you are in
depression times 10.
Right, so the swing is not just emotional. It's a swing of physical, mental, and spiritual. Somehow in the world, your whole shift is shifting.
If you think about, like, if you really now reverse to what you just said, if you're watching, listening, like go back and listen to that again and think of how that affects somebody that's not diagnosed or misdiagnosed or someone that feels like that without having a diagnosis and they didn't meet a criteria for bipolar disorder. So those things, honestly, bipolar presents itself as a mood swings heightened. Like it really does present itself as something that, and did you know that bipolar is the number one
diagnosis with teens?
Misuse?
Yeah.
Like it's misdiagnosed a lot of the times.
Especially by teens.
Right. I think it's crazy. Like I think it's actually.
Because like I also feel like it may be because one, the brain isn't fully developed, right? Our brains are not fully developed until
so we're already going through those
26 and 27 years old.
Right.
Guess what? Your brain's not even fully developed yet, Sarah.
That's fine. I feel like it's not, so
Right.
always changing.
But got 10 years in here. More than that. But so the reason why it's so misdiagnosed is like in our teens, we're trying to figure out our lives.
Right.
So like if you're watching this and saying like, oh my gosh,
That's me.
That's me. Like, no, please don't do that.
Please don't, because we're just,
that.
remember, this podcast is not therapy.
Right.
And this is not diagnosing any,
Right.
like, this is simply for your own entertainment and own knowledge of things, because we just care to put what we know out. I mean, we paid enough to get our brains, so we're going to put the information when we can out there.
Merry Christmas.
So next disorder that I want
Yes.
to talk about, which is one of, I think, our favorites to talk about. Can you guess it?
Borderline?
Yeah. Yay! I was like, please get it right. So, borderline personality disorder. Mood can shift drastically in response to relationships or perceived rejection. Borderline is so loaded. I'm gonna let you, since you like to do the very analytic stuff, like I'm just doing key points like of this, and then she obviously likes to take over and be very like
Mean.
no, I love it, analytical, because I think that that's where we balance each other out. But I like to say that it presents itself also similar to bipolar, and those two get mixed and confused.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people think that, like, BPD means bipolar disorder when it's borderline personality disorder. So that is something, too. Like, when someone says I have BPD, I'm like, oh, borderline. And they're like, no, bipolar. I'm like, okay. Right. I don't know where that changed. Probably the media, but.
Most likely.
So what do you have to say about borderline personality disorder?
I think the most simple
factors.
I think the simplest way to explain the difference between borderline and bipolar is BPD. Borderline personality are rapid and reactive. And they happen, the shifting is minutes to hours.
Correct.
And bipolar it lasts for days.
Correct. You can be in that manic episode for days, weeks. You can be in that low, like, depressed episode for days or weeks. Like, it literally can last forever. I feel like, again, borderline is that drastic shift and quick changing. Like, you can jump. You can keep jumping. Like, if you shift every few minutes or every few, like, 30 minutes, then you are borderline. Like, that is your key indicator of how long those episodes last or how quick they change or shift for you.
Right, and those responses for borderline are interpersonal triggers, feeling ignored, misunderstood, and rejected. All those things.
Which again, that is why BPD is so important to understand and cope with when you're in a relationship, because those things that you just mentioned are very prominent in relationships.
For sure.
So that is why I feel like but research supports that people diagnosed with BPD struggle to form and maintain those romantic relationships, friendships, everything, because they can be so intense. And then another day or another minute, they can be like not intense enough. Like, and it shifts very quickly. So yeah, I like that. I like that one.
And the bipolar, it follows a more cyclical pattern. Right. So it follows the here's manic, here's depression.
Correct.
It really does not go manic, 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 manic. Now here's a depressive. Like, it does not do that. It's very cyclical. If it goes that way, that's how it's going to go.
Sometimes in bipolar, in borderline, you can't determine which is which.
Correct.
That's where another thing, like, and this is why these go hand in hand with this episode of mood swings, is sometimes an average person with no diagnosis struggles to determine how their mood swings are affecting them, or if they are positive or negative. And then you add a diagnosis and kind of like that stereotypical media-based information, and it's just like an overload. And then you understand kind of why it is so difficult to pinpoint, okay, this emotion or this mood swing brings me into depression, but I thought it was something that was supposed to boost my dopamine. And that's where I think borderline is very prevalent, is that shift in, okay, well, this was supposed to bring me this, but it brought me that, and let's just keep going.
Yeah. It brings you in a more fragile state.
Correct.
In my opinion.
Correct.
Like BPD.
Very vulnerable too.
Right.
Like the fear of rejection, the fear of abandon, like all of those things are so prevalent in borderline. And
so BPD, I feel that where you were saying like that fear of abandonment, all of those things, to me, BPD comparison to bipolar, BPD is almost like that struggle of who you are. And that bipolar really is the self-image.
Yeah.
To where it goes boop, boop,
right.
boop, boop, to other people.
And bipolar, like you really care about that self-image to other people because it looks some type of way. But borderline people really just like, it's so deep in themselves. And it kind of also is like imposter syndrome.
Oh.
That is what I feel like presents itself to, is that a person that is in whatever that comes with the BPD, it's like the imposter syndrome of, what am I? Who am I? Like things like that. So, okay.
Yep.
Moving on to the last mental health disorder, which is probably the most common that other people know, is depression and anxiety disorders. So major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety, anxiety-induced thing, like all of those specific things. This can create emotional instability with quick shifts between sadness, irritability, worry, and anger. I feel like people think of anxiety as just worry and panic. Anxiety can bring on so many different emotions at once. Like I say this to everyone, but if you haven't watched Inside Out,
Yes.
specifically the newer one, because anxiety is in the movie. But I'm not going to spoil it, but anxiety triggers all other emotions. Like you can get anxious about something and then you can overthink about your symptoms of panic, and then you can get really scared because of symptoms of panic, and then you can get really embarrassed because other people are watching you having a panic attack or anxiety attack, and then you can get really angry that it happened in a public, like it snowballs. It really does snowball all of the mood swings. And that is why anxiety is a prevalent mental health disorder in the science behind mood swings, because of what it can bring on and the great, amazing things that we feel when we're in anxiety land.
It's like I put it in the words of like having emotional whiplash. Right? So it's like a shapeshifter. Right? So
and not everyone's shape looks the same.
Right. Anxiety is not just fear. It shows up as irritability, anger, restlessness, even feeling numb. So your body is stuck in that alert mode. And your mood becomes the warning signal.
Right.
The anxiousness is trying to tell you something.
Correct. Like you're in an unsafe... Right. Like jolting you out of... Kind of like when or if you burn yourself. Or when something like you scrape and like the initial like ow. Like, okay, we're not supposed to touch that, or we're not supposed to do that, or that just things like that. That's kind of how I correlate it, is those anxiety symptoms. I mean, sometimes they could be because, and we'll get to that in the next segment, is your external factors for mood swings, but anxiety really sets the tone for how the mood swings are going to play out. Right. And if you don't have a good grasp on it, like we talked about last episode, that is when the mood swings will go.
Yeah. It's like not having that decision, right? Like anxiety, again, is a mood shifter, shapeshifter, right? So let's say you're driving along in your car and like anxiety really looks like it has one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake and is trying to figure out what one am I going to press and can I press them at the exact same time? It's no, you can't.
I love that. Love that one. Okay, so next segment, external factors of mood swings. So the first one that I want to touch on is lack of sleep, poor diet, or substance use. And I know we don't have to touch much on the poor diet because, like you said, if someone came to you and wanted to lose weight and was super lazy, but also eating a lot of fast food, like your diet is so important. Like, we might have something to drink every time we're recording, but I feel like at least my water intake has to be so much heavier than what I'm drinking because it is a killer for me with my anxiety. And I also have learned that I need to have my coffee in the morning after I have my vitamins, my water, and even like little something in my stomach, like a cracker or something. It makes a world of a difference if I started my morning off with my coffee. So that is the poor diet little spiel. But all of these things can disrupt emotional regulation and mental regulation. So lack of sleep, if you're not getting a good, how many cycles of REM sleep do we get? 2? So if we tell clients a lot that like cut the napping because that nap
later
is your first cycle of REM sleep. There's no secret of why your naps are way better than your sleep at night because that's when your REM sleep's happening and then you don't get it when you're sleeping. So again, lack of sleep. Get your REM sleep, please.
Get your sleep. I'm telling you.
8 hours, please.
I'll go on that.
You love that. And then substance use. This could be a trigger to some, so it's okay to fast forward if you need. But
also pretty self-explanatory.
It really is. It really can trigger a lot of not only mood swings, but those mental disorders that we touched on.
Right.
So that's all I'll say about that.
Perfect.
Stress and trauma as an external factor. This can overactivate the amygdala, which is your emotional processing order of your brain. I love biopsych. That was my favorite class in school, so don't mind me. But reducing your ability to respond calmly and clearly. Like this, how I like to explain this is stress and trauma can shadow your rational side of your brain. And
that's the left side of your brain.
Right. The reason being is because it is stress and trauma can be so intense that your brain subconsciously tries to hide that aspect of the hurt or the traumatic experience or like anything that comes with trauma, and then it shadows that over, and you are left with a not so logical thought process, right? Because you're trying to rationalize or ration those thoughts,
right? And it's like quieting them down. It's
Correct.
Like when you're in that response, right? Whether you're in a trauma response or whether you're in, a psychological response, it's very much so you have to understand that's not rational brain.
Right.
That's not information brain. That is the left side of your brain. You are in emotion brain, which is the right side of your brain that you need to teach how to go between both.
Right.
And surprise, surprise, when you are doing the things that are very necessary for your body, eating, drinking enough fluids, having physical exertion, that is allowing your brain to go between emotion brain and logical brain at the exact same time.
Correct. Then the last one of the external factors that I want to touch on are rhythm disruptions. So I'm just going to use a couple examples, like jet lag or a different shift of work. Like you work third shift or for like
There
just
you go.
those things.
Yeah.
Things that throw off your internal balance that leads to those emotional or mental mood swings. So that is all for the external factors. The last segment for this episode is impact on daily functioning and relationships. Mood swings don't just affect how someone feels.
Yeah, it's not an internal thing.
They also can interact with how we perceive the world. So the first one that I have is how productive we are and our work environment. Inconsistent motivation or energy levels can affect how you complete your tasks or to-do lists. That is very prevalent in me because sometimes I like to make my list or like to have my tasks, and then it's ultimately just way too much, and then I never get to any of them because I can't even stand to look at it.
Right. So what would you do? What if someone does that now? What would you suggest them to do? If, let's say, they write down all of the lists and it becomes too overwhelming and then they lose that.
I would say, now coming from experience, might advise not to do the list because they are bringing more anxiety than good. So, but no therapy.
I love it.
So next, emotional overreactions can strain relationships in the workplace and cause impulsive decisions. So breaking it down a little bit is when you're in emotional overdrive and then you're acting on things during an emotional overdrive, this can put the pressure on how people perceive you that you work with. So I work with you. If I were to try to perform a task or try to show up here when I'm in overdrive or overstimulated or whatever, and it kept happening consistently, that would strain our relationship because I'm making an impulse decision on showing up to work, how I'm feeling, and then you're like, okay, what the hell? Like one time's fine too, but like consistently, why are we doing this? So in simple terms, that's what that one means.
Yeah.
The next one is social interactions. So people don't realize that mood swings can affect like you walking on eggshells, I guess. Like how you feel around other people or how your mood swings or their mood swings can affect how you're approaching a situation with them. So kind of like I feel unsure how I'm going to react based on a previous situation, and I don't want to shift moods, so I'm going to walk on eggshells and be very timid around certain people or certain situations.
It's like having these like micro moments, but you have a macro impact.
Correct. I love that one, actually. That's a good one. Trust and communication. So this can warrant like an emotional response and be very unpredictable. The best way that I want to put this into is if you lack communication or trust in any of your relationships, friendships, family relationships, romantic relationships, that's an automatic indicator for your mood swings to go off because you're lacking something that humans ultimately need in any relationship. Trust and communication. That is how we are bred, and that is how our brain is kind of wired to react on things. So again, like when we lack that, there's a lot of unpredictable with not only our mood swings but how we are reacting in our response to certain things. So that one was one of my favorites. Loved ones may misinterpret mood swings and feel like they are personal attacks or becoming disinterested in spending time with them. Now, this is nothing. When I say some of these, it's not something that like to make people feel bad, but this is the raw and harsh truth of how mood swings impact daily relationships. Like this is really prevalent, and not everyone is going to understand what you understand or to the extent that you understand. So this is why I wanted to touch on this being the last segment, because it is very prominent and helpful, obviously, for anyone that is struggling. And then the last thing is self-perception and confidence. Self-explanatory, but
Right.
having like an instability in your mood can make you feel like you're out of control, or like you lack the control in your own life, and you don't even know where that goes, and this can lead to guilt and shame.
Exactly. And too, it's like that people pleasing and that overproductive,
Right.
like overperforming, right? Because
Correct.
if you do that, you're so emotionally invested in every single interaction or every single comment, and you're analyzing until the cows come home, and the cows are never coming home. And then
Never.
right. And when that doesn't happen and you're expecting it to happen, boom, here's your mood shift.
Right. And that presents itself kind of in the ways of, okay, if I don't have control of myself, at least I have control of something else or someone else, and listen how that sounds. So, okay. And then the last little thing is this emotional, like, validity can feed into anxiety and low self-worth. And then this can bring on a reinforcing cycle that's not very healthy and actually very detrimental to your health, not only mental but physical health.
Right.
So this has been definitely a loaded episode, but I feel like everything that we've talked about was super important and super meaningful. And mood swings can be rough with or without a diagnosis. I want to make that so
very clear.
Like, so clear.
Right. And I think if it's okay, I want to like leave with this like little takeaway. Mood swings are triggered by social interactions. They don't make you needy. They make you human. We're wired for connection. Humans are wired for connection. And when the connection feels off, so do we. Let's rewind. Listen to that over.
No, really though, because you can bring that brings us back to everything point we made. That simple statement, like, and it's not even a simple statement. It's like a very complex statement, but it brings us back to everything we've talked about. Is that longing for something that you don't have or that you can't is not being offered to you can trigger everything that we said.
Right. So internal, external, all the things.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's all for this episode. We hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
I've learned over the years that people are human and have mood swings, regardless of how talented they are. Today, I'm looking at life from a realistic point of view instead of the way I would want things to be.